if you're in the job market right now, or you've been paying any semblance of attention, you've likely heard that the job market is strong, yet it feels impossible to find a job right now. CNBC did a video on it where they interviewed some experts in the space, and today we're going to watch it together, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents. I'm Seth. This is Quiet Salary, the best living through career mastery, and let's get into it.
On paper, the job market now looks solid. Unemployment hit a 54-year low at 3.4% back in January of 2023, and U.S. employers added 2.7 million people to the payroll in 2023 alone. The January jobs report also showed the 2024 labor market was off to a solid start.
So the data that they brought up right there is a little outdated. The unemployment rate has ticked up to about 4%, and the most recent JOLTS report showed there was a 625,000 full-time employment loss, and we only added something like 290,000 part-time employees. So essentially we replaced about half as many full-time employees with part-time employees, which is indication of a lot of softening in the market. And I think we're going to start to see some more trends in what they discuss here.
When we look at the hard data, it seems to suggest that the labor market has been fairly strong and, in fact, surprisingly resilient, especially after 2023, where we had headlines about layoffs and forecasts of recession. But when you look at the soft data, Americans tend to be a little bit less optimistic about how the economy is doing, and in particular about the job market.
Yeah, so from that standpoint, the job market is certainly softening.
Politicians just talking about how the economy is so great. I just want to scream from the rooftops. Then how come no one can find a job?
Yeah, nobody can find a job because the JOLTS, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics job numbers, they're inaccurate. It includes illegal immigrants. And then, of course, that indicates a stronger economy, which economists want to have that indication, as well as politicians want to have the indication of a strong job market as well. So there's a lot of perverse incentives to misrepresent the data.
Recently, unemployed full-time workers applied to an average of 30 jobs, only to receive an average of 4 callbacks or responses.
Those numbers of applying to 30 jobs and getting 4 callbacks seem high compared to what we're starting to see on social media. I've covered some of the additional videos in TikToks on this, but yeah, that would be nice for a lot of people if they got 4 callbacks.
Job vacancies, they're down a little bit, but not down enormously. But if you ask, how hard are you working to fill them? The answer seems to be not very right now.
Yeah, so not very right now in terms of trying to fill job vacancies is pretty accurate. I mean, there are straight up ghost jobs out there, so there's no effort whatsoever to fill those jobs, as well as overall, companies are not in a big rush, especially interest rate sensitive companies, because interest rates are high, which is restrictive, and so hiring a new employee is a big risk.
Hi, my name is Jenna Jackson. I'm from Ardmore, Pennsylvania, in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
This job market is like the craziest that I have ever seen.
I was frustrated just with how my job search process has been going. I haven't quantified how many applications I've applied to. It would be a little depressing, I feel, at this point to quantify it, but it was definitely in the hundreds at least.
55% of unemployed adults said they were burnt out from searching for a new job.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. If you quantify how many jobs, it's a dichotomy, because if you quantify how many jobs you've applied to and you're getting a really low response rate, then that can kind of create this sense of despair or burnout in your job search. But then also at the same time, you kind of need to be able to quantify and understand that data so that you can improve your job search activities. Because if you're not getting any callbacks or anything along those lines, that might be an indication of you're applying to the wrong type of roles, you're not as qualified as you think you are, or perhaps you've got some issues on your resume, something along those lines. So it's a very fine line to where you don't want to dig too far into the data, but also you kind of need to in order to make sure that you're being efficient with your time when you're applying to jobs, because some of these jobs can take a decent amount of time to apply to.
Can be a full-time job. There's a lot that goes into it. Filling out applications online can be tedious and can be time-consuming and can be really stressful.
Every day just feels like Groundhog Day. You're waking up doing the same thing.
When I looked at the data, if you just applied to a job through a job board, the odds of you getting hired were about 3%. So you got to apply to a lot of different jobs in order to have a chance to get them. And you're going to get lots and lots of just no responses.
Yeah, getting hired at a 3% rate if you're applying to online jobs, I think that's, perhaps that's generalized data, but from that standpoint, there is some people out there that have applied to over 1,000 jobs and they still haven't been placed, which indicates that that data is obviously individualized. So we need to make sure that we're applying to jobs that are beneficial and actually increase the likelihood. And overall, applying on online job boards and that sort has always been known to be a low leverage activity in a job search. It's more so networking and building those relationships so that you can have a more easy time getting in front of recruiters, talent acquisition specialists, and hiring managers, because AI has broken the job search. Like AI it's not doing great for people that are applying to jobs. We have people saying, oh, AI, write my resume, and then AI reviews the resume, and then AI rejects the resume. And so essentially from that standpoint, like the human connection, there's not any human connection. There's just complete disconnect. And from that standpoint, AI is looking for very specific keywords and those sorts of things where if you don't have that on your resume, you're not going to be able to demonstrate that you can help people. And the same kind of goes for when you get into talent acquisition specialists and recruiters. They don't know the nitty-gritty niche details of a role. So if you have super technical language that is not in the keywords, but still applies to the role, you might be thrown into the discard pile. So that 3% rate is brutal, but it's probably accurate, if not lower.
A 2023 study from Glassdoor revealed that mentions of applicants being ghosted by their prospective employers grew substantially since before the COVID-19 pandemic.
We often hear from job seekers that they send out tons and tons of applications and they don't even hear back, and that can be very...
I don't understand the whole ghosting aspect. I mean, pretty much every big employer is going to have an applicant tracking system, and you can send out the automated response. Actually, even on Indeed, you can post the job, and then this is the thing where Indeed is certainly designed for the job providers, because Indeed will just automatically throw out the resumes and not even show it to the hiring managers if they don't qualify. Yet, at the same time, if you have your resume uploaded to Indeed, it'll still show you that job so you can apply to it. Like, I don't like that disconnect. I think it should be, the ideal resume tracking system or whatever job search engine should, if you upload your resume and you don't have these specific qualifications on it, like, don't even show us the job is open. Like, yes, I know this kind of silos people into, oh, you're going to have to stick with your industry and unable to make any, career transitions. Well, from that standpoint, it's the likelihood that you're going to be able to pull off a career transition through online job applications without any networking. I'm going to say that's pretty much impossible. You need to be able to get your resume in front of a hiring manager so that you can then have the discussion and demonstrate your transferable skills and how you can provide value to the hiring manager.
Professional as well. It's like, especially if you're going to take the time to do an interview with them, you can at least let them know.
And I think it's because of technology. It's easy to put up a job, and so many people can see that job. So when you get such an overwhelming response, it's often very difficult to get back to every single solitary candidate. Certainly during the Great Resignation.
I mean, you certainly can't get specific advice on why we rejected you to every candidate, but if you're using an online application system, you should have an automated system to, say, give out that canned email of like, after careful review, we've decided to go with somebody else. It's not a careful review, but at least send that canned email so that people aren't hopeful. But then again, I think job seekers have adapted to this at this point, and if they don't hear within a week or two, they're like, okay, that job is off the table.
Takes for a company to hire an employee also hit an all-time high, at an average of 44 days during the first quarter of 2023, with some industries like the energy and defense sector taking more than 67 days for hire.
The application process has been getting longer and longer with going through multiple rounds and doing assessments. My worst experience so far was with a large financial institution where I had a phone screen with them, and I also had a Zoom interview with one of the team members. After that, I had a case study where I was given very vague instructions, and they got back to me and said that the team didn't feel like there was enough, that they gave me another attempt. In the end, I just ended up just going back to the recruiter and saying, I'm sorry, I don't think this is the best fit. Because even if I did move forward and they were okay with my revision, there still would have been 3 more interviews.
Yeah, so to me, that's an indication of a low quality employer. From that standpoint, the more interviews that you have to do and the more work that you have to put in before you even get the job it's especially some of these companies, they'll do kind of unpaid projects, and then it's actually solving a business problem that the business is facing in that moment. So it's really scummy. It's like free consulting just because somebody's looking for a job, but the company could have no intention of actually hiring them. Essentially, this is the struggle that people seeking jobs, especially if you're unemployed, face, because jobs are like relationships. If you have one, more people want you for one because of the social proof of like, oh, you're employable, or oh, your relationship quality as a person. So it's very difficult, but you still have to value your own time and have that self-respect of, I'm not going to put up with a BS application process, because the only way for these companies to get the message and understand like, oh, we have an outdated recruitment system, is if more people avoid or abstain from the desperation of going through that lengthy and arduous process. It's essentially, a business has 2 sides. They have the customer acquisition and then talent acquisition. You're not going to make it so incredibly difficult for your business to acquire customers unless you're overwhelmed, which inherently is what a lot of these companies are. They're overwhelmed with the amount of people applying to jobs, but the additional barriers don't actually increase the quality of candidate. If anything, it lowers the quality of candidate, because the good candidates that are at the top of the game aren't going to go through that BS process. So it's a perverse incentive, or it's backwards. Just ease your application process and you're going to get more volume, and the more volume you have, the more likely you are to find a high quality candidate.
A lot of employers think that doing more interviews is a good thing, and it's not a good thing. Most job interviews are not doing anything important. They don't know that the questions they're asking are going to reveal anything about whether you're a good candidate or not. They don't know when they ask the question what the right answer is, and this is a development that's been going on for a while. It's not a good thing for anybody.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that I did so many blog articles on interview questions. Like, people aren't taught how to hire, specifically hiring managers, especially, recruiters, it's a different story. There might be some standard operating procedures and explanations of what the right answer is, why you're asking this question. But for the most part, if you're a hiring manager, you haven't been taught how to ask the right questions and what questions to ask. And when you ask those questions, what you're specifically looking for. So there's a huge gap, and this is actually one of the things that I experienced in my business is we had an employee interview a candidate, and she kind of just asked the questions, and it was going through the motions. She didn't understand the intention behind the questions and what the right answer was. So she went ahead and moved along the person through the interview process, and we ended up hiring her. And it wasn't too long after we hired her that we had to let her go because she wasn't actually the right fit, and she wasn't showing up on time. And so it's important, if you're a business owner or if you're a hiring manager, that you understand why you're asking the questions that you are asking, so that you can know what the right answer is and understand what makes a person a good fit for a role. Because for the most part, a lot of interview questions are more so personality based and not necessarily indicative of whether somebody is actually competent at the job. It's just indicative of if they're easy to work with, which kind of goes into the realm of, is this actually an even beneficial process? Who knows? Well, we can address that on another day.
Really two terms economists use to describe the state of the job market: tight and loose.
Usually when economists talk about a tight labor market, they mean hot, essentially. And mostly what that means is it is difficult for employers to find workers. And so in that context, employers tend to be more hesitant to lay off workers. They tend to try to be more aggressive about how they hire, whether that means offering bonuses or offering on-the-job training. By contrast, a loose labor market or cold labor market is one where there might be layoffs, there might be hiring freezes.
We had a lot of layoffs, especially in the tech industry and the white-collar industry last year. So we've certainly moved to a looser job market. And I think, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'll have to double check the data, but from that standpoint, we are at the point where there are more jobs available than job seekers. So that would indicate that we have a strong job market, but that's not necessarily the case in lived experience. I double checked the data, and we have a higher number of job openings than we do job seekers. So there's 8.1 million job openings, but there's only, I think, 6.6 million job seekers. So that means there's more jobs available, meaning that you would think it is easy to get hired. Well, the issue is the quality of the jobs. The 625,000 full-time employees being laid off and 280 to 290,000 part-time employees being brought on indicates that these people are now going to be underemployed. So the job market is in a unique situation where hiring managers, especially on interest rate sensitives, are reluctant to hire, yet there is a disconnect making for a somewhat loose, somewhat hot job market, and it's kind of really industry dependent at this point.
You had so many job openings happening all at the same time.
Job openings surged to historic highs, while the country continued to struggle from a devastating labor shortage. With so many plentiful job prospects, even working Americans quit their jobs at a record pace for new jobs, in a trend that came to be known as the Great Resignation. But the job market is beginning to show signs of cooling.
There's less of a frenzy.
Yeah, so the Great Resignation was this corporate trend that we saw where people were just resigning because they were getting better offers and higher salaries. And then after that, some companies overhired because it was a overreaction from the COVID difficulties. And then now last year we saw the opposite of that, where we saw these mass layoffs. And so we're kind of back in the area where a lot of people are laid off. So we have a lot of job seekers, yet not a lot of jobs are open based on the interest rates and just the overall economy being kind of questionable in terms of its quality.
There's less of a frenzy on the part of the employers. If you're somebody who wants a job, you would like a frenzy on the part of the employers because you would like to have lots of people trying to hire you.
I think one interesting thing about the job market right now is that it is strong, but the hiring rate is low, and similarly, the layoff rate is actually very low.
The layoff and discharge rate in the U.S. has been hovering near historic lows, despite the barrage of layoffs reported specifically within the more visible tech and media sectors.
So I think what might be going on here is that employers are hesitant to lay off workers, they're hesitant to push workers out because of their recent experience with labor shortages. But on the flip side, that also means that a lot of workers are sitting tight.
Yeah, I think technically one of the corporate trends that we're starting to see, or the buzzword for the current situation, is the great staying, where people aren't switching jobs because they're uncertain about the economy, and employers aren't firing people because they're uncertain about the economy, but they're also not hiring people because they're uncertain about the hiring.
Not quitting, they're not being laid off, and so there aren't as many of those opportunities you would normally expect from attrition for folks who are trying to break into those roles.
Meanwhile, research from LinkedIn found that job seekers' search intensity in the U.S. grew by 27% in 2023 compared to the year before.
Yeah, so essentially the job market has softened. There's more competition if you're trying to find a job.
In 2022, there was one open job for every active applicant on the LinkedIn platform. By 2023, the ratio turned to one job for every 2 active applicants.
Right now in the marketplace, what we're seeing is both employers and employees being a little bit more selective. Everybody's taking a little bit more of a measured approach right now, being a little bit more selective in their choices, and that's why we've seen a little bit of a cooling in the marketplace.
And this is exactly the point that the most recent JOLTS report demonstrated, that there was 625,000 full-time employees laid off, but only 287 or 280 to 290,000 part-time employees brought back. So if you were full-time and you were brought back or transitioned to a part-time, you're now underemployed compared to what you were previously. So there's certainly a lot of pain in the market right now.
However, experts reassure that the cooling labor market is no reason for concern yet.
It is important to have a perspective that's a little more historical on this. If you're hunting for a job right now and you can't find one, it looks like a lousy job market to you. But compared to your parents' experience, it's a great job market.
Well, it is a lousy job market. I don't care to compare it to parents because their economic situation is vastly different. I think if you want to understand that a little bit better, watch Scott Galloway's talk on do we love our children or not?
That sentiment is outcomes minus expectations. So in 2021, 2022, there were labor shortages. Companies were hiring very aggressively. And so even if 2024 is shaping up to be a relatively healthy labor market, by recent comparison, it doesn't feel quite as strong.
I don't think the job market in 2024 is measuring up to be a healthy job market. And I thought this all the way back in January. And we even have some economists now saying that we might have entered recession territory back in October of 2023. So that in combination with the softening that we're seeing in the most recent jobs reports, I think it's clear that we're on the brink of recession. At least we are in a white-collar jobs recession.
If you are the Federal Reserve and you want to slow the economy down, that means you want to slow the markets down a bit. The biggest market is the labor market. If you look at what employers do, where their budget is, it's mainly going to labor. So you can't easily cool the economy down unless you cool the labor market down.
Experts also...
Yes, but the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate of maximum employment and low inflation. And so there's kind of some indications and changing in policies to where they started to ignore the dual mandate, but the likelihood of soft landing at this point, in my opinion, is not realistic.
Also noted that the health of the labor market will largely rely on where the economy is headed next.
If the economy does slow down more significantly in 2024, if we see a recession in 2024, the labor market can be somewhat resilient, but it can't fully buck the broader economic trends. And so that's definitely something we want to watch out for in 2024. It's not a guarantee that the job market is going to remain as strong. Broadly speaking, we might have some optimism about the economy. That doesn't necessarily mean that the job search is an easy process.
And the job search, simply put, especially with the advent of AI, is not an easy process.
And it has to do with what's going on in the bigger economy. It has to do with uncertainty, but it also has to do with a lot of quirkiness inside employers about how they handle hiring these days.
It's definitely
Also just the leadership crisis that the United States faces right now. People don't know how to lead. They don't know how to hire. They don't know a lot in the area, and it's not necessarily something that's taught.
difficult out there, but I just encourage you not to give up and still keep diving into your network and stay tight with family and friends, just to give you, the emotional support that you might be lacking at the moment, and to give you that confidence that you can do it.
What do you think? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've made it this far into the video, you may as well like the episode, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on future videos where I analyze the job market and how to master your career.